Port City Vibes. How is it possible that if you put a human in that condition by themselves in the bottom of a ship today, that they would die? But if you pack 200 to 300 of us in the same conditions, we lived. Please explain that, brother. What's up, Copper Colored family? Today I want to come on here and I want to break down a timeline for Port City Vibes. And I need him to explain to me how the same people that he believes navigated us by the hundreds over to this country from Africa barely navigated themselves without us a few years prior. So now let's get into the timeline. In 1492, as history states, Columbus came to the Americas. And this is where he came into contact with our copper-colored ancestors. In 1507, just a few years later, America got its name. In 1607, 100 years later, the 13 colonies were established. In 1619, the first slaves allegedly came into this country from Africa. Now here's where it gets tricky. Remember, in 1619, they brought over slaves. In 1620, that's when the Pilgrims first arrived. So the Pilgrims are the same people that in 1619 brought over all these slaves from Africa. In 1620, the Pilgrims got off of the boats. They were sick. They had diseases. They had plagues. They had infections. A lot of their limbs had to get cut off. And our ancestors nursed them back to health. Now get this. It is written that upon investigating the Pilgrims' ships, they had more guns and ammunition than food, ground shelters, clean drinking water, blankets, wood that they could burn to keep themselves warm. They had none of that, but they had a lot of guns, a lot of ammunition. So that tells you something about these people. When you can say, I am going to go into the unknown. I'm going to travel somewhere that I've never been before. And let's make sure we got enough weapons. Don't bring so much food. We're not worried about food. But let's make sure that we got enough weapons. Don't worry about blankets. Don't worry about shelter. Don't worry about clean drinking water. And we know for a fact, if we don't drink enough water over a period of time, we will die. They wasn't concerned about that. They brought guns and ammunition. 1920, the ships were leaning down into the water, some at the stern, some at the bow, because they had cannons and ammunition and all this old weird stuff, weapons of war, but they didn't have enough food. Port City Vibe believes that the year prior to these people who we had to nurse back to health, those same people who couldn't take care of themselves packed all of our ancestors in the bottom of these ships, brought us over here. Think about that. These people got off the boat, sick and dying, and it was our ancestors that brought them back to life. And they waged war against our ancestors as soon as they were healthy enough. Well, how did they do that? Because they brought all of their guns and ammunition, Port City Vibes. So how do you do better in 1619 navigating over here than you did in 1620 when you should have been 1 year more advanced? You truly believe that a few pilgrims barely made it over here with the amount of food that they brought for themselves, but magically the year before that, they thought enough about all of our ancestors packed in the bottom of these ships, ventilation at a minimum, light at a minimum, clean drinking water at a minimum, food at a minimum. Common sense will tell you that some of our ancestors would have died. Have you ever been to the store in the produce section and you notice that there's one rotten apple that's spoiling a lot of the other apples in the bag? Have you ever noticed that? This is where the term one bad apple spoils the whole bunch comes from. So what makes you think it would be any different with a dead body or dead bodies? Our ancestors were allegedly shackled and chained to each other, laying down horizontally. We were not meant to be laying down horizontally for months, sir. Shackled and chained. Do you know what rusting shackles and chains would do to you? I'm not sure if you've done the research on this medically, how it would have been impossible for our ancestors to have came over here next to dead bodies, our sisters on their cycles, people defecating on themselves and swimming in a pool of this filth. And you think that we would have got off of those ships and all they had to do was throw a bucket of water on us and rub some pig lard on us and we would have been good? Just shine us up and stand us up at these slave auctions. We would have been too weak to stand up at these slave auctions. If you look at any of the images of these slave auctions, we looked healthy. So how can you starve somebody out from Africa to the Americas and they get off of these boats looking healthy, ripped up and everything? Please explain that to me. Once again, think about the timeline. 1492, Columbus. 1507, America got its name. 1607, 13 colonies established. 1619, first slaves. 1620, the Pilgrims. I want you to think about that because the information you putting out is foolishness. Thinking that we are from Africa, the Africans will tell you that we're not from Africa. So I just need you to explain that to us, Port City Vibes. How is it possible that if you put a human in that condition by themselves in the bottom of a ship today, that they would die? But if you pack 200 to 300 of us in the same conditions, we lived. Please explain that, brother.